Can Floormasters Feel Love Too? By Rain, 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 on Archive of Our Own. Even the most vile of men can feel love. To a man like Midori, life is all about watching the suffering of others. Whether it is seeing people cry out in agony over mere physical torture, or watching their souls get torn apart over the loss of a loved one. But no matter what he did, he could never feel what he had always wanted the most: to feel complete. For his entire life, no matter what he did, he could never feel true satisfaction. Midori had done everything, both good and bad, and none of it gave him the fulfillment he had always wanted. At first, he believed that to achieve true completion, he had to let go of his mortal body. Midori, now with the body of a doll, a fake human, could do things he never could have dreamed of doing if he was still human. He could get his eye stabbed out and could simply replace it again. But that was still not enough. Not until one day, when he was walking by an area of the soon to be death game facility that was being renovated. At the time, the crew was pouring in concrete to make a proper flooring. The room was being used for a first trial, it seems. Feeling curious, Midori decided to take a closer look. Then he remembered something. In his entire life, up to this point, he had never known what putting his hand into wet concrete felt like. His weakened, remaining logic had told him to back away, since concrete is merely construction material, not to be messed with if you're not going to use it. But that side of him had been silenced long ago. He did not need logic to live his life, especially not to feel complete. After all, what is life but fucking around to learn new things? He dipped the tip of his index finger into the newly poured concrete. The new feeling only drew Midori and more, as he slowly placed down his entire right palm. This new emotion was new to him. However, for some reason, it feels exactly like where he belongs. Suddenly, a voice spoke up. The voice of the very wet concrete his hand is in now. Who are you? And why would you put your hand into my wet form? That's disrespectful, you know. You're going to leave a mark in me. It sounded almost annoyed. Almost. I really don't see why I shouldn't leave a mark on you. You'll be here for a long time now, figuring it would make a good first impression. Midori replied, thinking it sounds much more reasonable than simply being curious. Midori looked at the concrete again, this time more intently, perhaps with curiosity. This did not last long, though, as Gashu walked by and pulled his wrist out of the drying concrete now imprinted with Midori's hand. What in the world are you doing? Can't you see the sign says, no touching wet concrete? Besides, how many times did we have to replace your hand already? Take good care of your body for once, Midori, Gashu cried out in a mix of frustration and desperation. It is true that he hasn't been taking good care of his doll body, with the multiple risks he had gone through to get their participants to sign the consent form and all. Midori looked up from the concrete and noticed the sign Gashu was talking about. It said exactly what he told him, but it's not like the sign would have stopped him anyway. Sorry. I swear it won't happen again, Gashu. I simply felt a little curious. Midori replied with a sheepish grin, obviously meant to annoy Gashu even more. Gashu, who was tired of his antics, simply scoffed and left Midori and his concrete-stained hand in the same place. He probably wants Midori to take care of that himself. Midori half-heartedly got up with hesitation. The feeling of concrete was new to him. Then Midori realized. That feeling of wet concrete on his hands, that feeling of discovery and curiosity he had not felt in, perhaps, ever. He had come closer to his own definition of completion, without even trying. Midori smirked at this new feeling. He'll surely be visiting this room in the facility more than the others from now on. As he made his way towards the exit, the same voice from earlier spoke to him. Are you leaving already? Concrete spoke, now sounding much calmer than before. The tone of Concrete's voice almost makes it sound like it doesn't want Midori to leave. I'll be coming back eventually. You can't forget me now with that handprint of mine on you, Midori replied as sincerely as someone like him could. Well, yeah. See you around, new guy. Yeah, see you. Midori finally leaves the room and finally heads to wherever he actually has to be. He'll make excuses to come back sometime, just like he promised. After that fateful day, Midori found himself visiting that room more and more, for the sole purpose of meeting Concrete again. By the third visit, Concrete had fully dried up, including the part that Midori's handprint is stamped in. By the fifth visit, Midori and Concrete had become closer than any other people Midori had ever met up until that point in his life. By the 10th visit, it had turned into love, an emotion Midori thought he could never feel, but regardless, it welcomed him. Just like how concrete itself welcomed his presence back to that first trial room every time. And just like everything else, it comes to an abrupt end. Following an accident that led to Emery falling over and hitting her head on the first trial floor, Asunaro had decided on changing the floor material into something less risky. Midori, after hearing this decision, immediately spoke up. After all, the entire point of the first trials is to be risky. Why would they change it? But Asunaro's orders are orders. They've already made the decision before telling him. Of course they have. Midori is just a floor master, an employee for Asunaro. So why should they care about how he feels before changing the flooring of a room? So why does this hurt so much for him? Midori finally understood what it means to lose a loved one. For his entire life, he never had to worry about losing someone he loves, especially since he can't feel love for anyone. But now that he finally found someone that truly mattered to him, it's taken away from him. Midori feels like his very soul is being torn apart, like his flimsy doll form would fall apart in the blink of an eye. His non existent heart aches. He was right for the first time. He never needed love in the first place, but to him now, it's the epitome of his entire being. Love is the meaning of his life. Concrete is the meaning of his life. Midori, nearly in tears, runs towards the first trial room, only to find that the floor had already nearly been torn completely apart. Midori could no longer hold in his emotions and broke into tears. Tears he believed he could never shed, let alone for a loved one. Concrete! Midori screamed out in desperation. He sprinted towards the torn floor. Since about half of it had already been broken and thrown away, only a few parts are left, along with a bucket of a new batch of wet concrete beside it. Upon seeing the bucket, he instantly poured it onto the floor where the concrete was already taken away. He was no longer thinking about the consequences of doing that. Could he be tortured for disobeying orders, or perhaps executed for it? All that be damned. His lover was being torn apart like some sort of lifeless object. But it was too late. There was no way the new concrete could save his lover. The decision was made and was being carried out. No matter what he did, he couldn't change that. And he could only watch when the inevitable happened and the concrete was replaced with some other material. Midori kneeled next to the concrete. He wondered if concrete, his concrete, was still here. If it was suffering from being broken to shreds and thrown away. He slowly placed his body on the empty floor next to it. He'd at least want to be beside his love, if he'd never see it ever again. Midori, it hurts! A small voice rang out from the wet concrete that Midori poured earlier. Is this some kind of joke? Or is this a miracle, a chance, given to them for one last time? Concrete, are you all right? You can still speak? Midori weakly spoke. He's glad that his lover could still talk to him, but for how long, really? No matter. This was more than enough for him. He's just glad that concrete was still here. Thanks to you, I can speak again. Thank you. But I think this is the end. I can't stay here for much longer. They will tear me off no matter what you do. Midori already knew that. He already knew that their love cannot go on. How would he even explain it to someone, that he fell in love with a floor? Unlikely. Can I please feel your gentle touch for one last time, Concrete? Of course, Midori. I'm all yours. That same feeling of anticipation filled Midori once again, the same feeling that he had before placing himself into the concrete's welcome hypothetical hands for the first time. Midori slowly pushes the end of his scarf behind him and slowly bends down to be face to face with Concrete. Midori can see Concrete's hypothetical eyes. It was full of fear, fear of being torn apart and thrown away. It's okay now, Concrete. I'm here, Midori whispers to Concrete as he presses his artificial lips against the cool liquid. The tender feeling of Concrete's silky texture against his lips, it puts Midori in a state of calm he has never felt before. He finally feels complete. No amount of causing others pain and suffering can ever satisfy him more than a slow, passionate kiss shared with his true love. They may not speak much to each other, but to them both, actions speak way more than words. Concrete sweetly whispered to Midori, my doll. This really takes me back to the first time we've ever touched. Midori could remember it as if it were yesterday. One handprint made on a simple whim had changed his life forever, and certainly for the better, as otherwise he would not have felt the comfort and simple beauty in the presence of concrete. Slowly but surely, concrete began to freeze up again, telling them both that this time is truly goodbye. But with all these memories in Midori's heart, he can accept living with it, knowing that he'd finally become the complete man that he always wanted to be, with concrete forever living in his heart. He slowly lets go of concrete to let it dry completely. This is good enough for him. The handprint he had left on the dried concrete was there for the world to see, and so is the mark of his dried up lips. He hoped that perhaps someone in the crew that is nice enough would see it and think of what relationship some sort of other employee had with their now to be replaced concrete flooring. After all, Asunaro's ultimate goal is truly more important to them than petty love. Midori knows this well and has accepted it. But for as long as he lives, no matter as a doll or human, he'll teach the organization a lesson one day for taking his dear lover away. And he'll imprint it into their brains as with the way he imprinted himself into his concrete's heart. The end.